And I call the member for Deakin.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but the member for Herbert has impressed upon me the need to refute some of the pretty laughable claims she made. Firstly, she said Labor's history is clear, and of that I would entirely agree. Labor's history is very clear on the economy and budget mismanagement. When we inherited government, we had a worsening budget position, we had a slowing economy and we had rising unemployment. That is Labor's legacy. That is Labor's history. And we now hear the Labor Party very interested in budget rules. Well, the only budget rule we know from the Labor Party was that whatever they promised, they broke. If they promised surpluses, they delivered deficits. If they promised deficits, they delivered even bigger deficits. Who would ever forget then Treasurer Swan when he stood up, more front than Myer, quite frankly, he stood up and said, "Tonight I'm announcing 4 budget surpluses." How many budget surpluses did Treasurer Wayne Swan ever deliver, Mr Deputy Speaker? 0. He delivered no budget surpluses. Now we have, after 5 years of hard graft, 5 years of difficult work, 5 years with an unprincipled opposition in the Senate who has sought to frustrate and block every key economic reform we have made, we now see a position where we've got the fastest growing economy of comparable countries. We've got an unemployment rate that, again, most other comparable jurisdictions would absolutely die for. And we have a budget that is now coming back to surplus a year earlier than expected, on time and as delivered, but actually beating it by a year. And this is the absolute contrast between this government and the government whose, according to the member for Herbert's track record is so clear. The former Treasurer, now Prime Minister Morrison, was very different to any Labor Treasurer we saw, whether it was Wayne Swan or the very lamentable period of which Chris Bowen was Treasurer at the latter days of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd government. Every single target that Treasurer Morrison set, he either met or exceeded. Every single budget, every single MYEFO, not only did we meet the target that had been set down previously, we beat it. That doesn't happen by accident. Labor thinks all of these things happen by accident. We've also had Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen running around our country talking about the millionaires and billionaires, the so-called millionaires and billionaires that they were going to go after. And what do we see on the eve of the next election? The Labor Party's biggest single new tax, the biggest single new tax that the Labor Party is proposing is the retirees tax, which will hit 1.4 million Australians, people on fixed incomes, some people earning well below $30,000 a year who might lose up to 30% of their income. They will contribute the most to the $200 billion or thereabouts, $200 billion and growing, of additional taxes. So here we have the Labor Party and Bill Shorten running around all hairy-chested about going after the millionaires and the billionaires. And who's he going after? He's going after Nana. That's who he's going after. It's absolutely outrageous. The other group they've been going after, although they've had a latter-day conversion, thankfully, is small business. We've heard Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen talking endlessly about the Apples and the Googles of the world. Well, the message to the Labor Party has been that Australian businesses with a turnover of more than $2 million or a turnover of more than $10 million indeed are not Apples and Googles. They are small businesses who might employ a handful of staff. They might be a small manufacturer in horticulture or farming. These are not Apples and Googles undeserving of reduced taxes. They are absolutely deserving of it. So the member for Herbert has goaded me into making this contribution because I couldn't believe what I was hearing from her on Labor's track record, and now them clutching at budget rules as being some kind of stick to whack the government with. It's quite laughable, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank the member.